we on? Good. Welcome to the Better Than Not podcast. Sometimes we get it right, sometimes we don't. But when we at least do something, we know it's almost always better than not.
Hi there, and welcome to Better Than Not, the podcast that aims to capture shifting perspectives and thought-provoking ideas in conversation, based loosely on my series, A Changing Frame of Reference, which you can read on the Substack app, and I hope you will, as it might give you some insight into what the podcast is all about. I'm your host, Doug Gardam, and today it's a pleasure to welcome my guest, Doug Dueck. Doug, how are you?
Good to see you.
I am so glad you're here to talk today. Very quickly, to start off, because there's a lot that we're going to talk about today, but Doug is an entrepreneur. He's a father of 3 and a grandfather of 6. He's also the founder and president of Well of Plenty, which is part of how I even got connected with you in the first place. So very quickly, Doug and I met at the recent apologetics conference here in Abbotsford. A young man who I've already had on the podcast, Dr. Lorenzo Smith, had him pictured to be on my podcast. And believe it or not, we were both present at the conference, and then we met. I saw Doug on the screen. He was part of their film production or documentary, Can I Trust the Bible? And I kind of in my head said, I think that's who Lorenzo was talking about. Well, believe it or not, in the hallway, there we are, and there we met. So welcome again, Doug. This is kind of a very special thing for me. So to start, I'm just trying to kind of figure out, you've got a vast background as far as what we started to talk about, but how did you come on to this whole idea of Well of Plenty, or even describe what it is? Because it's about water, but there's some pretty special things that are going on there.
Yeah, so as a businessman most of my life, I would have been involved mostly by donation of cash and so on to different causes. And so I didn't really have an opportunity to get away for long periods of time, particularly if I wasn't accessible by computer or phone or whatever. So these third world or developing countries weren't on my list. I could go away a long time, I mean, many times over a year for short periods of time, but I had to be completely accessible. As I got a little older and I'm starting to, slow down a lot of the business aspects, we had a little bit more time. So our daughter and son-in-law, they do crusade ministries around the world. So they travel extensively, many different countries, and we'd never gone to a crusade that they were fronting.
Right.
And so Miranda, our daughter, asked, well, would you and Mom want to come along to Malawi, Africa?
Wow.
And so we said, yeah, that might work good. And so that was the beginning of how we got involved with a program. I can elaborate on that if you want.
Well, I was just saying, so as I saw it in the documentary, this was kind of a way of getting people in the area water, and so that they could get water for themselves. And it started to kind of broach into a number of things, but you have done this in a number of areas now with this Well of Plenty company or foundation that you're doing that with. How did it begin? Did you recognize there was even a need there? I mean, because that's so far out of our culture.
Yeah, so as I said before, when I was stuck in the office looking after things, I would help people financially that were doing well drilling and so on in different parts.
Okay.
So I had a background a bit that way, but not really in a not in a management kind of scenario, just
Right.
in a cash donation basis. What happened in our trip on this crusade was a bit unique in how it began. So Miranda said, would you and Mom come out? And I said, yeah, but your dad gets pretty moving around a bit. I don't know if we'll be around the bus too much, maybe a little bit. So I'm going to look for some other things that might happen, and that would also interest us.
Sure.
So he had a friend in he's now a board member for Well of Plenty, but he's a Canadian, uh, at that time in Saskatchewan, a pastor,
Oh, wow.
is now in Winnipeg. He's he's the go-to guy for a company called Global Vision 2020.
Okay.
And so they provide eyeglasses by prescription for about $5 a pair. They're produced in China. The inventor is a former military man that came out of the Rwanda genocide operation.
Wow.
He was the commanding officer assigned by the U.S. to bring peace and closure to the genocide. And so when he retired, he said, "I got to do something that's meaningful," and he created Global Vision 2020, the products that the patented products.
And he's a pastor today?
So Greg Weems, the guy in Winnipeg, now saw a documentary on National Geographic and said, "I got to be involved," and that's what he
got connected with them.
He got connected, and so now in fact, the company just moved their headquarters for distribution to Winnipeg from Washington, from Virginia, I believe. So
did you know about this prior to creating Well of Plenty?
Yeah, so I was getting at, I said to Greg, "Well, I'll take a box of glasses," because I knew him, and we're connected. He said, "Yeah, they're about $2,000 a box," and I said, "I'll take one." And so I told Miranda, "That's what we're going to do, that on the side." So when we got over there, I met a pastor.
So this is in Malawi.
Now we're in Malawi, yeah,
with your daughter's crusade that they're supporting. So we were part of the. Yeah, we were just guests at the crusade. They were the speakers, and so on the side, we had these glasses and the contact person was a pastor, or is a pastor, in Malawi, who already had background in this program with Global Vision 2020. So we went there assuming we're going to help a few people fit glasses. They're sort of the binocular style. You adjust the eye prescription by dialing in. Right in the glasses.
Well, it's a little plastic reader, and you can dial it in like you would on binoculars, and that gives a reading on the other side for you or me to put them on, and they're color coded and numbers. Anyway, so it's an easy thing to do.
Yeah.
And then you just pop these lenses into the frames according to the prescription, and people see for
the first time in their life.
$5.
Unbelievable.
So that's how I got to know this pastor in Malawi, who said, "Okay, well, yeah, you come along and we'll dispense some glasses. And by the way, do you know anything about agriculture?" And I said, "Well, I know a little bit, but it's a long time ago." He said, "Well, when we get missionaries..."
He had no idea that you were involved with agriculture.
No, I'm just a white guy coming from Canada. With some glasses. So he said, "We have this piece of land that we'd like to farm, but it really doesn't happen because we try different things, lagoons and digging some things to get some water, and we don't get it done." And then he says, "We get missionaries over here," and I asked them, "Can you help us with that?" And their eyes glaze over and say, "No, we're here to teach Bible."
Right. It's
all each to their own.
Absolutely. But it's a good point. It's a very good point.
So he said, "Well, is there anything that you could see that you could help with?" I said, "I don't know." I said, so he brought us to his home.
Yeah.
And around his home, he had these sacks of vegetables growing, like sort of just like a small sack full of soil. and he was growing these vegetables. I said, "What do you do with that?" And he says, "Well, I can, I get a little bit of income from it. We eat, obviously, we can eat from it." And I said, "Well, you grow these in your right around the farm, that like around your yard." He said, "Yeah, that's what we do." I said, "Why doesn't everybody do that?" He says, "I don't know." And
he was just a lone kind of guy that said he figured this out.
Yeah. So he said, well, we need some water too. Like I have a little well, but I got to go and fetch water from the town well, and I got a little well that works for part of the year, and then it dries up. I said, "Okay, well, yeah, I'll go home and think about it." So this was May of 2019. And then I came home and I thought about, well, what could I do with this guy? And I thought, well, we do drip irrigation in Canada and around the world. That would help, because it's an easy way to keep your crop growing for very little amount of water. You can do it with, have to water it with a can. So I started thinking about that, and then I went to the local distributor, Southern Drip, and I said, I've got an idea to water some plants in baskets or in pots or in sacks. And so a young gentleman over there fixed me up with a suitcase full of stuff. And then I said, well, I'm going to need everything I can get to produce this on the site, because they don't have anything at all. They don't have, there's no equipment to work with.
Right.
But I said, the pastor says he has a well and he needs a pump. So I took a pump along as well. I put everything in my suitcase. It made it for weight. And I carried it over there in November.
So this is another trip. Yeah,
2019. Yeah, the second trip in 2019. So I went there specifically.
You've also never been here before, right? Like this is a whole new.
No, I'd actually never been in Africa. I didn't actually know where Malawi was when
you went on the cruise
asked to come. I said, I don't know where that is. Yeah, I'd never traveled there. So once I brought the kit with me in November, the idea was to put the pump in his well, the one that typically dried up. Well, it was mud. There was nothing in there to pump. So the pump didn't get used at that point. So the kit included sort of a 5-gallon pail, a 22-liter pail, some drip irrigation tubing, some stake emitters. So they're like basically they're pressure compensating. So you basically have water flowing from an elevation of about 5 feet, and then you can run this drip piping to different pots, and the stakes are plastic stakes. You stick them into the pot where the roots are. So as the plant grows, you just keep pushing them down, and they just drip a little bit of water. There's no water on the surface at all. So very little amount of water needed to grow a big crop.
You're getting it right to the plant.
Right.
In other words. So he's never seen anything like this before.
No, they'd never seen anything of that type. So when I arrived in November, the pastor had about half a dozen, I don't know, maybe there was 8 guys, young men along the wall. They're supposed to learn how to do all this work.
Oh, okay.
So I had my equipment. I had a Milwaukee drill along because I knew they didn't have any of that.
Yeah.
And took it out, and they're going to do a hole saw for the pail and the filters and so on. And so there was one guy in that row that had an interest in a real interest in what I was doing. And he said, how does that fitting adapt to the drill? And I showed him how the chuck opens and closes, and the other guys, they're pretty much glazed over.
Just not what they're
they didn't know what was going on.
So are you doing all this through translators too, or is this like?
Well, Malawi is an English.
Okay, so they understood what you were saying.
some do and some don't. I mean,
Okay.
if they have an education, they speak English.
Okay.
If they don't, they speak Cho, which is an African language.
Interesting.
But yeah, so there are translators around. Um, anyway, the young man that understood or wanted to know something, his name is Moses.
Mm. So Moses, so in setting up, this is the person that was introduced in the documentary that apologetics put on Can You Trust the Bible? And
Right.
hence this we'll go on about Moses because you're saying this guy is kind of special.
Oh yeah, he's more than special. He's God, a God send to make
He's
this
aptly
project work. Aptly named. So Moses was billeted to this pastor's home. Moses is from Eastern Congo, from Goma, Congo, and he basically was a self-taught coder as a kid. And then he eventually ran out and started, getting on his own. By the time he was 17, he had French degrees and so on in software. He was doing gaming and things.
Yeah.
And he decided that there's no future for French coders.
Oh, okay.
So I got to learn English.
And hence he learned it himself.
Yeah, so he started learning English in Congo by crossing the border into Rwanda, which is basically right on the outskirts of Goma, where he came from. And he would have dialogue with tourists on the lake that were there in Rwanda, which has a bigger tourist area that draws attention to English-speaking people.
Right.
So he learned a little bit of that, and then he decided, well, he'd have to learn how to speak English also for education, besides just conversational. So he said, "What I should start a school." So he started a school for university students, being the first student, and he learned most of his English through
Teaching.
television and and then teaching. So that school, I think, began about I'm thinking about 8 or 9 years ago.
Okay.
And it continues to operate today. And the way that they do that is each student that learns how to speak English has to stay on for a program, and so there's no cost. Basically, they just keep running it, and there's many people have learned English in that. And I visited in Goma, so I've met some of these scholars that come out of there now. They're all IT people.
Amazing.
And so Moses was in Malawi at that time as a billet, getting his software degree and his robotics degree simultaneously in English. And so I was also fortunate to get to his graduation a year and a half ago.
Oh, that's cool.
And
really cool.
So he was the top of the class and the highest grade point average in the history of the university. He's just
Brilliant.
He's a brilliant man.
Wow.
And he's now 28 years old.
Wow. And all ready to go. So as I remember in hearing what this documentary that Apologetics Canada put together was, part of the problem, and I think you kind of were alluding to this, was when they get educated, they leave. So they have a hard time like reinforcing that because they're given offers elsewhere in the world. So you were really fortunate to even get this Moses and him being there.
Yeah, so Moses, of course, has had many opportunities to leave Africa. He's part of the Mandela Youth Organization. So there's about 600 of those top people in the continent. So he goes to, he has a lot of connections, both continentally as well as globally. So he could go anywhere, but he sees this as a mission, and he wasn't really geared for agriculture, although his mother was a subsistence farmer in Congo, and his father was an evangelist. And the father The father just passed away recently. I was fortunate to meet him some time ago, but the father started 500 churches in his lifetime. He started preaching at 17. Had some education with the Swedish missionaries at one time when he was young. Basically at 18 or so. And he started a lot of churches.
And this is all through the Congo?
Those are in the Congo, yeah.
Amazing. Wow.
So Moses has a background in evangelism and not from that perspective, but he's a child of an evangelist. He isn't necessarily the evangelist. So as we all know, people, choose different paths, and somehow along the way, Moses and I connected, and he is just the guy that needs to do this.
So when you met him, of these 8 people, he was obviously had a bend to be going down this road. What followed after that? Like, how did that start?
There's another odd story to this.
Because I'm thinking explosions in my head is why I'm saying that.
Okay, so he was a guy that I could immediately teach something to that I wouldn't have to stay there. I could teach him
take it on
how to do something and talk about it. And of course, Zoom is available and WhatsApp, and so it's easy to contact each other. The pastor, he wanted to have a committee operating this program, and I said, well, I probably will choose not to use that program, but we'll see where it goes.
That's so I hear you loud and clear.
So the first step was, I said, I'm going to put this small program together, and then I'm going to check back with you because I can see pictures on.
Yes.
And so I'm going to see how you manage this. If you watch, and if you're conscientious, you put the water in when it needs to be put in. You clean the filters and so on. Then we'll look at something else, because the pastor kept asking for a well, and I said, well, that might come, but this is first.
Oh wow. Okay.
So then it was obviously going well. We could see that everybody was picking up the knowledge to operate this very simple system.
So just going back for a second, you were talking about meeting this one gentleman. He had these in his house, and he was kind of hand watering them.
Yeah.
And then you asked, like, why doesn't anybody else do it? He didn't have an answer to it. So this is already changing that world, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's right. So nobody's doing it. Although if you go to the cities where there's a bit more money, you'll see the nurseries do it the same way. So they have these bags, these jute bags, and they fill them with soil and they grow things. So you could see them, but it's, in the developing country, everybody typically thinks somebody has to own this to do it.
Okay.
So we could work for somebody, but we couldn't think of doing it ourselves on a small scale. Right. So we're trying to change that. But anyway, the next step to this was, it was working. So then I said, okay, I guess we'll, I said if it worked, we'd look for a well. So the next step was, because I'm a business guy, I don't really go for drilling wells by just, okay, I'll point over there and I need a well. I said, well, we need a hydrologist to do this work. And so we found a hydrologist locally. Moses did. I asked him to. And then we have another friend over here who's also been to Africa with me at one time, a young fellow who is a hydrologist and geologist. And I said, well, there's our peer review. Yeah. So we got all the details together, and we got a contract driller to give us some pricing. And I packaged the contract from here and said, nobody's doing anything without paper. And it's good. Yes. This is how it's going to go. And I'll be there. And then COVID came along. Oh, okay, yes. So then I said, well, Moses, I'm going to have you go there with the hydrologist, and you guys deal with the equipment, and you're gonna have to learn. how this all
And
works.
he did.
And he did.
Amazing.
And so I've actually never been there for a drill.
Because he just took it on.
Yeah, so he did the first one, and the pastor got involved, and it wasn't that good, that part of it, because the pastor, I mean, he doesn't understand the systems.
Mhm.
So there was a bit of cheating going on that, but you know, we packaged it back up, so it cost a little bit of money to get it right, but you know, it happened. And after that, Moses just took over, and he's the general contractor for all drilling now. They bid it out, and so when we drill wells, he manages the hydrologist that we use. Also, a hugely talented young man. He's on contract with I think with World Vision somewhere in a different part of the world now. But he can still do it on WhatsApp and Zoom as long as you have the right people and the right tools on site. So we basically can pinpoint. We never lost one yet. We've hit
Water
dead on every time, and it's pinpointed because you know we're all pretty, I guess, anal.
That's clear. No guessing. Yes.
I don't like surprises. There's
No,
enough of those
yes.
in the world without having
Yes.
to add some more.
Yeah.
So I mean, God is there with us, obviously.
My goodness, yes.
But you know, he also challenges us to use what we can use, and technology is part of what God has given us as humans.
Yes.
And it changes all the time. So when there's new technology, we use it. It's there for a purpose.
So how many of these wells would you have drilled now?
I think we have 8.
And that would feed
Well, it depends. In Malawi, they have 4 months of rain and 8 months of no rain.
Right.
So it's not
a little
intermittent.
different than here.
The other way around.
Yes.
We have 8 months here of rain. So they have a dry season and there's no rain at all. So it's not intermittent.
It just stops.
And during that 8 months, of course, at the beginning of the dry season, there's water in creeks and rivers and so on, and there's some shallow wells. A lot of people drill wells that are fairly shallow, that work for part of the year. We don't do any of those. We do deep drilling.
So when you say deep, how deep is that?
Somewhere around 60 meters, sometimes.
Oh, so this is serious.
Well, not 60 meters. 100, about 120 feet or
That's
so.
still pretty deep.
It's still pretty deep,
Yeah.
and so it goes through the softer soils and goes into rock and so on. So formations are typically hard, and water is consistent. It's down there. So there's a lot of places in Africa. There's good water, but they don't get to it. They do shallow wells, and then they dry up, and and they need them the most at the dry end of the dry season. So I don't know. There's thousands come to each of these wells in the driest part of the year, but not all the time. I mean, so the quality of the water is high. It's good quality.
Well, it's so deep.
Yeah, so it's clean. And that goes to all of the area. So we're in Malawi, in Burundi, and in Congo right now.
How many would be served by
Well, I mean,
it's hard to say.
It's hard to say. There is one well that's on the border of Malawi and Mozambique, and people from both sides of both countries come to get water there. I'm told as many as 7,000 people have been there, like in the dry season. I'm not sure.
Wow.
But I would want to quantify that with a little clicker.
Some research.
I'm not that sure, but yeah, I mean, there's certainly 500 to thousands.
Yeah, that would take advantage of that.
That would take advantage.
And are they growing a lot of produce from this? Just
Yeah.
drinking water, or is
No, so what we did around each of the wells is we created a demonstration garden to do drip irrigation from that. And
Okay.
so all of our wells are powered with solar powered pumps.
Oh.
And we draw water into tanks above ground, and then we use gravity flow from those tanks into drip irrigation systems. We try to keep the demonstration gardens to a minimum. The best value we see is about a hectare, so 2.5 acres or so. We can train typically 30 to 40 families per growing season. So we have them. We designate different rows to each family so they can see a crop growing
for themselves.
All of our crops are continuous cropping because you can grow all
year round.
Intercropping, they're all organic. We don't like paying for fertilizer, and nor do they, or they can't even get it. And so we implement animal manure almost immediately. As soon as they start growing, they start we have some incubators for chickens. So we create chicks.
Wow.
We get chickens running around. We add guinea pigs and rabbits next. And they all eat from this excess produce that's growing in their program. And then it doesn't take long. It's about sort of 6 months into the program, they start to add pigs.
Oh, okay.
And we're just implementing cattle now in some areas. And the cattle we're beginning to work with. There's a lot of in the rainy season, grasses grow as tall as 10 or 12 feet high, and then they burn them off.
Just gone
later. So we've said, no, you're going to you know what a scythe is? I said to the you're going to use a scythe, and you're going to cut that, and then you're going to feed your cattle because we have water, we have food, and those little cattle you grow, they look like goats to me. So it says you're going to have to fatten them up a bit. So the whole thing is kind of extremely simplistic. So the demonstration gardens train the people how to use a drip system with good technology, using solar powered and good equipment, and then it paired back down to that pail kit. So when they get out of this program, they learn it, and then they can start using a pail kit at home. And so then they can grow excess
themselves.
One of the factors you have to look at is when people are told you can grow this type of a crop or that type, and you can only do it once per year.
Yeah.
That comes from a colonialist idea.
Yes.
So they either just gather what's growing, or they grow maize, or they might grow soybean. But once a year, then it doesn't always happen. And of course, you're talking about a farm with an acre. And corn farmers in the world, they don't grow by the acre, they grow by the thousands of acres, right?
It's gigantic. Yeah.
So how do you compete as a subsistent farmer growing maize?
You don't.
No. So you create something that they can do that we can't really do year round. So this continuous cropping means that when they learn how to grow the crop in the demonstration garden, they just take over 3 rows that were left by the last group. So the last group has gone through like a 3-month period to get a crop done. That's kind of the
So you could do 4 a year.
So
as an example.
But we don't stop at any time in the year. So that means that the day that they are the new student, they're planting a crop.
Oh, wow.
And they're harvesting a crop tomorrow, because it's continuous. We never stop the rows.
Yeah.
So they begin their training by planting a seed and harvesting a crop.
They see the whole thing.
And they see that, and they continue to do that. And so the next group comes in, does it again. So the minute you have this thing into production, it's only about a month into it that they before they start taking some of the leaves and so on the tubers, like they might grow beets.
Wow.
And then they can eat some of this as it's growing, and then some of the production that they don't need goes for market. So we've created now a for-profit business that's not connected with our foundation.
Right.
We just coach that. But
You've enabled it.
Yeah, so what we do is Moses again, he's an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And so he and three other individuals became Fruitful Mart, which is a for-profit business, and we coach that. So what they do is they purchase all the excess produce that's grown
Okay.
in the demonstration gardens and also by the individuals growing around there, and they basically distribute it to restaurants and hotels and high-end buyers as a distribution company, and then all of the costs to produce the crop are taken off of the gross pay that they're getting, or the gross proceeds, and then at the end of the day they get net proceeds to the farmer. And so the question would be, are they getting an ethical value for the produce that they're selling?
Yes. Yeah.
So you have to take all these costs off. So the distribution means you have to go and get it.
Yeah.
There's a transportation cost. There's a cleaning cost. And the demonstration gardens all have cleaning kiosks, so they do that there. Then there's a grading cost. And there's agronomists that are teaching them and continuing to mentor them through how to do a continuous crop and intercrop and the use of manures. So all of this product that's created is directed. Again, I said I'm like, you can't just grow something because you like to grow tomatoes. Right. You're going to grow what the agronomist says you're going to do and when. And so even the distribution company, Fruitful Mart, knows where each crop is and at what stage it's at. And so they're managing their customer base with on time, on budget, and at a quality that you and I could eat.
Unbelievable. And this is in 5 years. Like you've done.
Yeah. So, but
without being there.
But but the thing is, a lot of things in life are a lot simpler than people want to make them.
Oh my! This could take us down a whole nother rabbit hole, Duck. Because I'm very much in line with that. Because I think in many ways the computer and mismanagement of the computer has created that, right? Because you do many. It's like a scheduling system, right? You get this implemented scheduling system, and you say, well, I could have done this on pen and paper years of what's going on with this system, and I'm always late now.
Yeah. That's part of a difficult thing to educate young people with.
Mm-hmm.
But if you get a guy like Moses who can use all those tools but understands why you ask for certain things,
right?
I never ask him twice.
No.
Like I may say, well, let's do this, and we agree that he's going to do that, and then I don't ask him, but he presents it to me
because he sees the value.
Yeah, and if he doesn't understand what I'm asking him to do, then he will ask all the questions without any trouble. Like it's not like I'm listening to somebody say yes, yeah. And then I'm wondering, did they really hear what I wanted them to do, right? Because managing people is, a manager can look really good if the people do what the manager is requiring them to do.
Yes.
On time again. So the customer base in this distribution connection, these restaurants basically I mean, they've been doing this now for, I think it's about 3 years. The restaurants are basically paying extra for deliveries
Because they can count on
because
it.
they say we've never had any brokers ever come to us with consistent anything. So let's say for
Yeah.
example, potatoes. So Malawi, many Africans like French fries. So in the morning,
Me
all of-
too.
in the morning they'll have roasted potatoes on the
Oh, yeah.
buffets, right? That's typical in Europe or
Yeah.
in Africa. And then they'll have boiled potatoes, and they'll have, obviously for mash and so on. And then they have French fries. Well, all of those potatoes are different type grades,
Okay.
right? They're
Yes,
different,
yeah.
not necessarily a different variety, but different sizes.
Right.
And so nobody ever graded or even cleaned these. So restaurants were struggling with that. Well, this distribution company grades them all, cleans them all, and basically says, "Here's your French fry potatoes. Here's your."
Unbelievable.
And so the word on the street, it just basically sells. They're just loaded with people that want to buy their stuff, and so the community is basically recognizing that on the farm,
Right.
on the subsistent farm scale, because they said we never were able to do that. We can sell to the marketplace nearby, and the brokers rip us off, and then we don't really get much for it. And so, I often ask the question, particularly of women when they're growing crops, because of course they're feeding their family first. So I'm careful how I ask the question, because you'd get the same answer anywhere in the world. If you say, "Are you getting enough for your produce?" What would you think the answer is anywhere in the world? No, that's right.
Never.
Never. So I never asked that question like that. I do ask the question a different way, though. I say, "Are you doing better than you were before?"
Okay.
And they say, "Absolutely."
Unanimously.
And then of course, as women often are much more direct, I suppose, in their answers than maybe
Yes.
men are. I'll say, "So what else? Is there anything that you can tell me about how things are now as compared to before?" So, like, what did you get up in the morning thinking before you were working with this program? And they would say,
Oh.
"We would wonder, how are we going to feed our kids tonight?" That's the first thing we'd
Oh,
wake
my
up
God.
to. And they say, "We don't think about that anymore." And then I said, "What is it now that you do?" Well, she says, most women will say the same thing. Now our husband is at home because he's not looking for work. So now he's anxious to do things, and the whole family's involved. And so now we have a family again. And so this is it's pretty profound for people to say
I'll bet
that, because these people aren't necessarily they don't choose a lifestyle that takes the family away. They'd like to be together, but in a lot of places they can't.
Right.
And so the man goes out to dig a ditch one day, and he's in the lineup, and he might get a job today, but tomorrow he doesn't have one. Then he's, like, all of a sudden he's gone, and things happen, and the family's destroyed, right? And this now gets them together. And interestingly enough, maybe it's I don't know if it's really a gender thing, but quite frankly, I mean, the women are there to feed their children, and the men are there as soon as there's something they can make out of it economically. And so we're teaching the economics through this program, through the distribution side, and all sales are made through basically the internet. So, like, basically the distribution company delivers your pay on your phone, and now they have bank accounts. I mean, they basically never had that. It was all cash. Now they just go to the Airtel machine and pick up their money. And
So, Doug, this all came from you going and visiting this guy's house that had a bunch of plants around it that he told you he watered and nobody else did this. And you said, like, why doesn't anybody else do this?
yeah, because if you
That's an amazing story.
if you simplify things, there are usually solutions. If you want to create a lot of smoke and mirror, there's that solution usually doesn't happen in a good way. It's probably just costs a lot of money.
Well, I was going to use the term real. All of this is real. Like you've described no subsidies. There's no kind of someone's helping someone else do something. This is really like that. I think it's in Matthew, right? Where it says you're teaching people how to fish.
Yeah, that's right. And there, in fairness to others, there's a lot of groups that see that program, but what we are doing differently, and I think is more effective, is we're not actually stopping in the classroom. So we're basically saying, there are other groups that say we can teach people how to do this, but then they leave them alone. And we found, I mean, not all cultures in Africa are the same either. So
Right.
there are some that are pretty aggressive, and they get it, they jump on it, and they move along. Many others, they slide back into the old system.
Familiar territory.
So yeah, so like let's say in the farming, somebody really likes to grow tomatoes.
Hmm.
And I actually do too. So I grow a lot of them at home just for kicks. But if you only grow tomatoes, then you have a problem marketing them later. And you also have a problem with perishing. And the product doesn't last, right?
Right.
So, we continue to operate with the agronomists so that the agronomist directs the customer, or I mean the farmer,
Mhm.
what to do, and they're always in contact. And so that I suppose one of the things about it is because the market buys the product, there's enough money to pay everybody.
Right.
So from my perspective, as we're raising money for demonstration gardens and wells,
Mhm.
that's all we raise. We raise money specifically for the infrastructure, and we say that money is going to be gone forever, like from our side.
Right.
All of the other stuff is self-supported.
Right.
So even the pail kits, those small kits, we started off, and we still certainly we accept money for those kits because it applies to a family.
Right.
But the reality is, as we train farm families on these demonstration gardens, by the time they're finished their 3-month program, they've already sold enough produce off of those 3 rows to buy their own kit. And so they go to their small village after that. Now they're the trainers. And so the next step is they try to assist the neighborhood.
Mhm.
So one of the challenges that we thought we might see is that people would steal the produce.
Right.
Because they do on big farms, right?
Yeah.
They never do from their neighbors.
Interesting.
Because they're just they actually look at it differently than the ability to find a finished product to eat. They say we could be next with a kit, and then we don't need anything. And so the entire thing it grows from within.
Yeah.
Those farmers grow into leaders. The farm leaders become those demonstration gardens,
Yes.
local leaders.
It feeds itself.
And it just feeds itself. And so you do have, you have the expansion, the entrepreneurship. Some farmers are getting together and they pool 2 or 3 guys together and they'll buy a pump and they'll start pumping out of the creek in the rainy season. Like they may get a crop for 8 months
Right.
from the river.
Right. But they've got another avenue to pursue.
Right. And then of course the other thing is, from my farming background, I was also, I used to market a lot of produce in terms of grain and fertilizer and feed. And so I would buy that product from farmers, I mean the grain anyway, and market it elsewhere through Chicago Board of Trade or the Winnipeg Commodity Exchange, depending on where. And many people do that, but I always said the farmer always came to us to do that for them because they like to grow crops. They don't necessarily know how to market
They know where their spot is in the chain.
Right, and that's an important thing for people to understand,
Absolutely.
that you can't do everything right.
Right.
You have to do something right, and then have others that you can depend on to do the rest.
Amazing. So in essence, COVID actually helped you,
Yeah,
because if it hadn't happened, you would have gone there.
Yeah.
And this kind of put it on the onus on Moses
yeah,
to figure this out and how it worked. And he had the abilities to do that.
yeah, and he's beyond politics. See, that's the difference that's the difference that I see in many aspects in the entire world.
Yes.
So here's how I see the way that the politics plays in. So we used to keep everybody stupid or uneducated.
I think we're still doing that.
We kept them uneducated.
Yes.
That was colonialism.
Yes.
Then colonialism sort of left, but the dark-skinned people became the colonialists. So
Right.
there's a lot of corruption continues to happen in these countries, but
Because they got to take their percentage from what's going on, right?
right. But the difference is that now education has come to a level playing field around the globe. Not everybody has it, but when you have some of the educated people like Moses and his friends, and like I said earlier, I've met a fair number of them in the Congo, particularly. They all come from the same scenario. They come from a street kid
Right.
situation, and they just excel. Well, those people now see that they have an opportunity in Africa
Yes.
to be a developed country, providing they can get rid of the problems, the conflicts.
Right.
And we in the West need to be on a completely different mentality than what we were, I suppose, before we educated or allowed the education to happen. So if you keep the people in the dark, they don't know any better.
Mm.
So now these developing country educated folks know more about our politics than we do typically. They don't watch our news; they watch the program. So even in the case of say U.S. aid,
Mm-hmm.
so so I mean, just a number. U.S. aid is assumed as a huge amount of money
Yes.
that flows out of the U.S. and other countries, and it is, but it's not we have to look at percentages, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the U.S. up until recently,
Yes,
was providing 1.2% of its annual budget to aid. 1.2%.
Yes, that's true.
Now it's cut off.
Yes.
So in these places, what I don't think the public actually knows in the West is that the recipients are cut off.
Yes.
So if children were born with AIDS, or you have somebody with diabetes, or you have malaria, you just got a death sentence because your clinic is shut. It's closed. So we in the West, like everyone, I suppose, thinks of a number as being high, not a percentage of what we have.
Right.
So we have a lot. And so we have to give accordingly, and percentages are the only way you can really track what it is that we're actually interested in funding.
Yep.
So
when you say 1.2%, that's not a lot.
No, that's not very much.
But the number would appear to be staggering.
So let's put that into perspective. I'm a real estate developer.
Yes. So
in 1990, when I started in BC, we were selling homes in Coquitlam for $169,900. $170,000, and then we crank it up a little bit with some higher quality, and we were up about 210.
Yeah.
Today, that house, my first starter homes in 1990 would be worth something like 1.6 million.
Yes.
But it's 30 years old.
Right.
So the number seems astonishingly high.
It's hard to comprehend, actually.
Yes. So we used to talk, as I was a young businessman, we would talk about millionaires.
Mm-hmm.
Now we talk about billionaires,
yes.
right? In the same
same way.
context,
Yes,
right?
yes.
We shouldn't be talking about a number that just keeps going up, inflationary. It's what is a house worth in terms of living there?
Right.
Well, we don't do that. We say, well, we have a $1.6 million home in Coquitlam
Yeah.
that's 30 years old, but we didn't pay that because we're still there, right?
Right. Yes.
And so we have to look at percentages and say, where's the importance? And this is going to bite us in the West. If we're not willing to give 1 or 2%
Yes.
of what our budget is in to operate a country,
Yes.
we're very greedy, and the world sees that, right?
Yeah.
And we're not talking about comfort. We're talking about the death sentence. We're saying, okay, you shut the doors.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to get anything from us anymore. And there's no alternative because we want the minerals.
Yeah.
But we're going to make you suffer first.
Yeah, you're putting a different spin on this for sure than what we're really understanding, right?
Well, because it's the number thing rather than the percentage
We
thing.
get so like
I can remember percentages a lot better than the billions we're talking about.
oh yeah.
Everybody can, but we don't. We try to spin that out of the picture. So we say these are these billions, and that context doesn't work for us. As a population,
it's an intentional thing, I think, Doug. Like that has been thought about for a long time as far as how to spin it, because I think it does make a huge difference as far as how we're looking at it, right? And what you just said, 1.2%.
That was before. That was last year.
You're kind of going. But if you put that into the billions of number, right, you're immediately thinking, wow, that's big. But 1.2% is not big by any stretch. Like that's not even, that isn't a tithing number even, right? Like that's the part.
No, and in fairness, many countries from the West don't provide much more. Right? Some of them are sort of 2%, but they still do it willingly.
Mm-hmm. It's a really, to me, when you say that, it made me think of you were saying if you have malaria now, it's a death sentence, right?
Yeah.
And we've been watching this series called Alone. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Because I've been kind of blown away by it. Because I know, again, going back to the conference, I'm switching things up a little bit, but it's coming back to your point. And it was, they were saying at the conference, Andy opened with, we're not supposed to be alone. It's in Genesis 2.16, right? 2:16, I think it is. The first part. Well, the first part is it says, you are not to be alone.
Yeah.
And then we all hear the second part, which is, so I will make you a helper.
Yeah, that's right.
We always hear that, but we don't hear the first part.
Right.
And we just came through, as you mentioned, COVID, the pandemic, which made us alone more than ever in our lives.
Yeah.
So now we're watching this Alone series, right? Like, they've got Navy SEALs on these. These are survival experts. And like after 35 days of being alone in force, not that I want to be, because I don't. That's my kind of part of my shifting world is I don't think we have any idea how bad we need each other. Like I'm blown away by it. And these guys, like Navy SEALs that are like 35, I'm missing my kids, I'm signing out, right?
Yeah.
And I'm blown away by this. Psychologically, it's like it messes us up big way. So in the recent season, we saw one of the guys got sick on moose meat. And he was like an experienced guy. They promoted him as an experienced guy, but he was done like in 25 days or something like that. And to your point about malaria, like some of the diseases that you just mentioned are curable diseases.
Yes.
If he hadn't been on the show and been out there and done that himself,
it
was a death sentence.
Yeah.
Like, what are you going to do? And I think you bring kind of attention to some of this is that it is a problem. Like we're not recognizing to me what that problem is because we're seeing numbers that are when you see, well, we just saved $25 billion. You're amazed by that.
Mhm.
We are.
Yeah.
But we're not seeing, well, you do realize that that is almost an insignificant amount of the overall picture of what money is available.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's what you're saying. Right?
No,
Understand?
I am. And I guess the other part of what I'm presenting with that is that the developing countries have people that are educated now at a level that's high, much higher than many of us in the West.
Mhm.
But in any case, at the same level as the highest
Yes.
academics in the West.
Mhm.
And you can't fool them. You see, so they're
Yes.
looking at statistics, and we're told not to look at statistics. Like we're supposed to listen and say, trust me, I'm telling you what you need to know.
And keep scrolling through your phone so you can stay distracted.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's important, I suppose, to look at when you're looking at media in particular, that you have a cross section of what you're looking at, and then you have a choice. Do you want to just believe that network, or do you want to do some research on what's actually going on? And so, I think again, it comes back to your, being alone or not being alone. If you don't know your neighbor, you can't necessarily trust your neighbor. If you know your neighbor, you'll know whether you can trust him or not. Let me give you an example of that going back to my early business days.
Because I want to kind of bridge into that world. So that's cool. Yes.
So talking about how people have changed in my sort of, 40 some years, 45 years of,
Yes.
of time. I'll give you an example of how different things have changed with the way that we, I suppose, are more greedy or less trusting.
Mm.
So I used to run harvesting equipment in the U.S.
Yes.
and in Canada, and so when I was one place in Colorado, I used to harvest in Burlington, Colorado, sort of near the Kansas border. And I went in one year and I harvested this crop for a guy who lived in this Burlington town, and he said, "You can do the harvesting on the south farm, and I'll go to the north farm with my equipment." So each of those farms was 30 miles apart from the city, I should say.
Okay.
So I had my crew working on this assigned farm, and then at the end of the harvest season, we got together, had a dinner, and he paid us, and we left. And the next year, we went to the same farmer. That's kind of your typical program.
Yeah.
So he said, "Okay, Doug, you can go to the north farm or the south farm again. The same as last year. The only difference is this year we have no bin space for our grain at all. Like, so everything has to go to the elevator. And there'll be huge lineups because everybody's harvesting at the same time." And so he said, "The government paid us to keep our crop in the bin this year, so we don't have any bin storage." So I said, "Well, could we stack it in your Quonset?" No, he says, "That's for my equipment." I said, "Could we stack it outside and haul it out later?" No. So I said, "Can I, if I can get you the same price?" I think the price was sort of $3.25 a bushel at the time for wheat. I said, "If I get you the same price, do you care where it goes?" Because I said, my machines, way back then, I mean, my machines were sort of $1,000 a day to operate.
Yeah,
and
you can't have them sitting.
I want them sitting, right?
Absolutely.
And so he said, "No, I don't care." He said, "You can sell it wherever you like as long as I get that money." So I phoned around and got a broker from Greeley, Colorado, about 200 miles away. I said, what can we do? I think he gave us 5 cents a bushel more. I said, I need a semi on the field by the hour, every hour.
Yeah.
And the rest of the stuff we can look after going to the elevator. But I says, I need a semi. He says, I think he said 300 semis. He says, they come in all kinds of shapes and sizes. I can get that crop into Fort Worth, Texas, 700 miles south, and you'll get 330 in the field. So
Wow.
a nickel. I said, okay. I said, I need the tear weight of those trucks.
Yeah.
Because we know how much is in a combine bin, but we don't know what your truck carry.
Right.
So every truck came on the field on time, and they gave us the tear weight. We loaded those trucks, and off they went to
Texas.
Fort Worth. Never saw them again, of course, because it's a long ways away.
Right.
It was different trucks each time. So I tell that story because the customer, Fred, he never questioned anything about whether somebody ripped them off for the wheat.
Right.
I could have done that with the combines.
Mm-hmm.
The trucker could have done it with his driving.
Yeah.
The company that hired the truck, like the broker that owned the trucks, could have said drop a bit off here and there. And
you would never know.
Nobody would ever know,
Yeah.
But because all the weights came back only from the delivery point in Fort Worth.
That's the number you're looking for.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I can in my heart say that I believe that nobody took a single thing.
Right.
And Fred never asked the question either. That was the kind of trust we had. And this is in the early 80s. This was the kind of trust I had with a farmer.
Wow.
With a handshake deal.
Yeah.
And they were all handshake deals. And you know what? Life was easy.
Yeah.
Because I know for a fact nothing got missed. All of the grain that went to Fort Worth.
Yes.
And he made more money than he would have at the
waiting at the elevator.
Yeah, well, we would have lost money waiting, and he would have made less money for his wheat. And so, if we could go back to that kind of a trust, which I guess we can't. I mean, MAGA is not going to make that happen.
Well, I was going to say there's that because we don't. You'd said earlier to me about thinking out of the box, and it becomes such an expression to me. But what you just demonstrated in that story is truly thinking out of the box, because you were given some pretty clear guidelines, right? You're saying this has changed for whatever reason. You didn't even ask why it changed, it seems, and this is what we have to solve.
Yeah.
And you solved it. And everybody kind of won. Like, it was just,
right.
That's out of the box. Who thinks that way, though? Like, where do you think that even came from for you? Like, did you grow up? Like, you said you grew up in a farm. And so I've had friends, still have friends, that are farmers. And in my thinking today, there's not a more creative role that you can have than being a farmer. And the reason why I say that is that if something as simple as a hitch and it breaks, you're not there waiting 3 days for somebody to come and service it.
No.
You're figuring a way to jury rig that on so you can get that load from there to there. And that's not unusual. That's just what happens every day, right?
Right.
Something goes.
Yeah.
And I always kind of even equated it to camping, like outback camping, right? Not the cushy kind of camping, but you're actually carrying the canoe on your back and you're doing it. And every new site you come to, because you're creating basically your site, you got to figure out where you're going to hang your feed bag, where are you going to put the tent that it's flat enough, where are you going to get the firewood from. Every one of those is a creative endeavor because they're different every time you go to the camp.
Right.
And to me, what you're saying there in a farmer situation, you got to do the same thing. You're doing it every day. So do you think, I'm not trying to answer the question that I asked you, but When you think about how you brought that at 20 to your world with the harvester thing, where do you think that came from? Like, was it just a gift that you were granted, like as far as to think that way? Because not everybody can do that.
No, I feel that, yeah, God gifted me with entrepreneurial
Leadership,
skills.
yeah,
I mean, I think that's for sure. It seems to be, business is easy to me, and it seems like I said earlier to before we were on the air, I said that service is number one. If
Yes,
you give
yes.
good service, you got a customer. If you mess up on the service, you won't have a customer. And so, the problem that we live in today's society is we rely on paper and we rely on lawyers, and people abuse that. Like all justice should be for the sake of the right decision, but it isn't,
No.
because people push those buttons. If you say everyone has to win in a business scenario, then you will all win. Like if your program
So what
is
do you
like,
think?
if your program is, I don't need the last dollar, I just need to spread it around a bit. So you and I are going to share that a little bit.
Mhm.
You're my customer. Um, a little bit of it you put up, and a bigger chunk I put on because I'm selling it,
Right.
and then we all win. But if you say I'm the customer, you eat it,
Yes. Yeah.
I might not be able to do that.
Right. Right.
So we live in that world where that's going on right now. They say if you don't have it, we'll take it. Like so in the third world or the developing world, we say, well, we need those minerals, but we're not going to pay you for them. Like, why aren't we not working with those people? They should be benefiting from the resources that they have.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I say, well, in my small way, I can get under the radar
Right.
by allowing people to have an economy through agriculture, because first they eat,
Yes.
then once they eat, they can work at something else as well. Like, it's not really difficult, but you have to see
mindset.
you have to see the benefit for others, and not for a short-term benefit for yourself. And I think that's really the key. And yeah, maybe I think farmers learn how to do many different things,
Yeah. Yeah.
and they have to be a bit, there's got to be some ingenuity to it, because as you say, that maybe the part's not available at the dealer as you're trying to fix your hitch, but the rain is coming and you got to get it done now.
Yeah. No, to me, it's an amazing. I never recognized that until kind of later on, but it's like it's that creativeness that you've got to figure that out. And I think many times, you kind of alluded to earlier, but education teaches us the other, right? If we're just, and when you
It should be a balance, though.
oh, should. And when you say about, because I'm not against education by any stretch, but if, like you said, of how they're being taught by planting a seed and by at the same time harvesting, like they're not just being taught in the classroom, this is what it looks like.
Right.
Like you're actually being part of it. And to me, that's what educating really is about. And how do you bring that thinking out of the box? I often think is just like a gift. That, like, here you found Moses here.
Yeah.
And by the way, this is a person's name. This isn't Moses out of the Bible.
No.
But like I said, he has the right name for sure. And it's I think it's just, you probably recognize that in people very quickly too.
Mhm.
I'm going to guess.
Yeah, I think that's part of that. That God put us together. But yeah, you're right. There's some recognition of that from both sides.
No
in
question.
this case, like, so he sees the mentorship, and we have some other people like that. We put together. So from the distribution company, we have another individual who used to market crops around the world on a contract basis. So he's the mentor there.
Yeah.
And so we're also supposed to provide some knowledge to the next generation of leaders, And it's a combination of things. Technology moves forward,
Yes.
and some of us get left behind a bit. As you get older, you're going to get left behind, but at the same time, you bring other things, and they will, as that generation gets older, they're going to bring other things, but technology keeps moving.
It's not going to stop.
Right. And so we have to see where we can plug in and do good things with what we have. And, the largest part of how we can help people in the world is to be part of their life. If we're part of their life in a somewhat insignificant way,
Yes.
it will actually make a difference.
Well, this is where I kind of come back to, like, even when I first met you and the idea of, well, a plenty. And I say this to my wife, she's a counselor, and I say, you're going to help people help themselves.
Yeah,
Like,
right.
that's the part.
Yeah.
And that motto kind of, that's what you're doing. Like, that's what you're doing with Oil of Plenty, right? You're helping a group of people help themselves. And it's very biblical too, but it's just one of those things that sometimes I wonder whether the essence of that has disappeared from us. It's just we're gone, and is it because of relationship? Because we're not sitting down and saying and talking to people. This is the part of the podcast that I've kind of gotten fascinated by. And that's why I like having in-person discussions, because it's so different. It's still great having a person talk, right? There's no question. But when you're in person, you can't beat that connection that you're having that is at a level that we're not even able to understand, I think. And I think that's why we need people so badly. And so when you go, like when you describe that first time in that gentleman's house, he's got plants and you're talking to him, right?
Yeah, that's right.
How would you get that any other way but to be there?
No, and I think that's what we miss in our Western culture. We go on vacations, and I said that from the beginning of the podcast. I didn't have time to go to these places,
Right,
even if
yes.
I wanted to, I couldn't.
Yeah.
For time.
Yes.
But once, if you are able to be exposed to it,
No question.
there's something that will tug at you that you can do that's different than handing out money. I mean, money is good. We can put a plug in for wellofplenty.com.
There you go.
There's a donate button there too. But the point is, you see, you can plug yourself in to a situation if you see it. If you just hear about it, you can't really do it quite the same way.
It's not the same connection to me.
No.
It just isn't. And you find that. And it's interesting. So you're headed off again, right?
Yeah, I'm going now in June, yeah.
So you're going back to Africa?
Yeah, this time I'm just going to Malawi.
Okay.
I wanted to go to Congo, but it's still a bit of a risk right now. The rebels are in control there, and
so
things are okay now. But
so there was two questions I had. One of them is around Moses and the fact that the sense that people, once they're educated, are leaving there to go other places. Is he finding that he's able to keep people there because of what he's experiencing through the organization and working with you? Second thing is, because again, it's the news, right? It's the Congo, like you're not hearing that's a very safe place to be.
No.
So with those two questions, I know they're very different, but I wouldn't want to leave with that. So go to the Congo, because that's where you were talking about, like you're going to Malawi.
Yeah, Malawi.
this time.
Yeah.
That's reasonably safe. You don't have people coming in trying to grab at what you're putting in place. That people are seeming to be adapted to it and like what's going on, correct?
That's right. So in Malawi, there's really nothing to steal for anybody. They're so impoverished. There's nothing there, so people don't really cause too much trouble.
Okay, that's fair.
In the Congo, it's basically political issues around corruption, but it's also driven by Western corruption, putting pressures on those governments over there. I mean that when you go and visit these people, they're just people. None of them want the war.
See, does that not? When you hear that, does that not surprise you? Like the reason why I say that is I've read a lot of war stories.
Yeah.
And when they're on the front, there seems to be an association that goes on if they get a chance, like to connect. They don't want to be there.
No.
But their leaders are driving them to be there.
Well, the circumstances are largely driving them to be there. So if you have not like if you can't eat, you join a club.
That's going to tell you to make it even.
The club is a rebel group.
Yes,
So,
there you go.
So they're ordinary people if they're not pressed into what,
right,
right. And so,
and you get a chance to talk to them like directly, right, and understanding what they're going through.
Yeah, I mean, oddly enough, so the rebels attacked Goma, where we had a camp. Like we basically had a demonstration garden started at a displaced camp.
Oh, okay.
And the rebels came in. I was there in November, and they so they were up in the hills.
2024.
Yeah. And the rebels were up in the hills scattered around, and then they came down in January. I won't say why they got the go ahead, but the locals all know where the go ahead came from.
No doubt.
They displaced all those displaced people again and attacked the city.
Okay.
Took over the city. And when some of the people finally got back, all the tents were destroyed. They burnt down because the rebels were the cause of the displaced camps.
Right.
So they burnt them down, but they left the infrastructure there. So yeah, our garden was still there.
Oh wow!
So people are back there working it again, and in the other country, the other city in Bukavu, it's on the other side of a lake, also on the eastern border of Congo. We have another one there. That was more in a developed town where Moses actually comes from.
Okay.
And we had already started distribution of produce into the city. And in the city of Bukavu, I think it's like 2 million people or so. They have about 5 outdoor markets that everybody goes to, sort of the large scale markets. And so the distribution was happening in those locations. Through the distribution company, so in other words, Fruitful Mart operates in all of these locations.
Okay. This is Moses' company?
Yeah, Moses and 3 other partners.
Okay.
So they operate it there, but again, the academics operate the business end of that, but they're locals, so they can communicate well with the society around them that's farming.
That's ideal.
And so anyway, the Bukavu was attacked, and they have. I mean, people put money away in buckets, right? Like they don't really trust too much else. So they were out of banking for 3 months in Bukavu.
Oh, wow.
But they hadn't run out of money because it was squirreled away.
Yes.
And so people said, "Where did you get that produce we used to buy? We'd like to, can you get it again?" And so the distributors said, if you go up to Ehemba, that's a 20-minute drive. If you go over there, you can buy it. And so the city went, basically, people were walking for as much as 3 hours to go up to that area. The demonstration garden taught the locals that their valley that they thought was worthless could grow vegetables. And then there's it's right along the Ruzizi River, so there's some flatlands in the valley that were flooding typically. So we taught them how to ditch, put drainage in, and so they're all growing crops. So this city was getting all their produce from that area. And this is all brand new, that God put that in there. I mean, that's what we hear now. We say, well, God must have planned that in 3 or 4 months, they will need that produce out of that location, and it happened.
Unbelievable. It's crazy, quite a story, Doug. Like I'm kind of blown away by that. So, with that, going back to Moses' experience, is he finding that he's able to keep people there with this, or is it like?
Yeah, that was your question.
Yeah,
and yes, so So the difference, I guess, that current technology has given to Africans
Right.
is that they see an opportunity for themselves better in their own continent than anywhere else. So they say we could get short-term, like we can make a lot of money on a short-term basis.
Right.
But if we want to do anything for Africa, we should stay here and be the leaders. And so there's a lot of high quality leaders being produced in Africa. And, in to some degree, I mean, there's a lot of East Indian business owners in Africa as well as Chinese. So the Chinese will come in and do infrastructure. They'll build roads and so on. So what we hear here is they want the minerals, and the Russians want the minerals, and everybody wants the minerals, and it's true, they do. But the difference is that the Chinese, they come in, they build roads with their equipment, brand new stuff, like nobody else is bringing it. Yep. They're doing it, and they want some minerals.
Right.
But
in exchange,
they're spending some money in advance.
Right.
And so, and the Africa, I mean,
and you see this when you visit.
Yeah, so I see that, and so if you were to go there, you'd say, okay, well, there's another story behind this, right?
Right. Absolutely.
So if you're helping people that don't have a road, you're not really going to say, well, get out.
No,
even though you want some minerals,
right?
Like, so are you going to steal the minerals after you build the road?
Right.
But at least we'd have a road, I suppose. And other Western countries, they wait. They don't do anything. And then they say, we'll make a deal if you give us the minerals.
Right, right.
So that's kind of where we're sitting right now. So the educated people that you're asking about, why are they not leaving? They see where China came from.
Okay.
And they say that wasn't that long ago. We could be next.
Right, right.
And when you travel through Africa, it's remarkable what they have.
I'll bet.
It's really astounding, really. I mean, you can watch National Geographic and see the safaris in Serengeti and
Good point.
you can see a lot of things. You can also see films produced on UN projects and so on. But the reality is, there's beauty in Africa that you can't imagine. And when it comes to agriculture, as we're talking here, I mean, you can't grow stuff like that.
No,
anywhere.
No, I mean what you're saying to me is like you're using boots on the ground expression to me. That's what I use all the time because I'm more around that world today than ever because I just find it so frustrating trying to find out anything that's actually real without having your boots on the ground. And so when you're one of the great examples of being able to share this because you boots are on the ground. No, you don't live there, but you visited there countless times now, and you observe, you can see, and this is where I'm kind of heading to. When you went there for the first time in 2019, going back to with your daughter, and on a crusade, you took eyeglasses with you.
Yeah.
Did you have do you find it almost incomprehensible what's happened? Or is this just part of your life? Like just part of
No, I'm in it for the ride. I love it.
Oh, I can tell you love it. Yes.
I truly have been blessed. Everything I've done, both in business and in pleasure, I thoroughly enjoyed. So I mean, God puts that in front of me, and I mean, I don't know. I guess it's. I don't think I get wrapped up in what might be. Simple things like people will say, "Aren't you afraid to go there?" And I can simply say, "Well, I don't know. I don't think so because I'm helping them. They like that."
And I go back again. It's just to me, it's like you went, as you said, with eyeglasses.
Yeah.
And most would say, well, this is a pretty big thing just to do that. You go there, you talk to a few people, but you're looking around. And now 6 years later, you've created this ability to create and I'll say grow and harvest like an ecosystem right there that they have adopted, and aren't adopting it because you're forcing them to. They're adopting it because it's
they're taking ownership of it, and I think that's the key, and it's integrated between the academics who are helping them. So even in Malawi in particular, we met while Andy in Apologetics Canada, where they're one of our like a young agronomist who's been working with us now since her graduation a number of years ago. She said, could we come to their university, their school of agronomy, to meet the dean, and the dean, and we said, yeah, let's do that. So we all got in to this meeting at the university, and the dean said, well, let me get the vice what do you call her, the second in command at the university, vice chancellor. She'd like to hear, what you guys are doing as well. So, I went around the room a little bit, introducing each other or introducing us to them. And of course, then it got to Well of Plenty, and she said, well, you guys sound like Christians. And they said, yeah, we are. Well, she said, I am too. And she says, so what you're doing, I'd like to know a lot more about what you're doing. So I said, well, Moses is here and he'll connect back with you. And so a few, probably, I don't know, a month or two later, Moses said, well, the vice chancellor would like to implement a program where their third year students come and see what you're doing. And maybe they can work together with you guys because they don't have a chance to see it any other way.
Right.
And so that began, and they graduated some students out of that program since then. And they said that these students come with a lot more knowledge than we ever had before. So now we're able to take all of their third year students for a term of 1 month per year, wherever we can place them.
Right.
And so they come to an area that they originate from. So they're not culturally disconnected.
Right.
And then they come to learn as well as to teach at the same time. So they're practicum. So it's like a co-op program, right? So the university has put that together with us. So it's very, very helpful to both sides.
Oh, man.
And we are now teaching also school kids. So we've got the middle school age children, sort of the 14-year-olds or so. They're 12 to 14. They're now training how to use pail kits at the school. And so this is happening in a number of schools.
And then they can take those home.
Yeah, so they basically can teach others. So internally, those older students are learning, but they're also bringing their buddy system in. So the 6 and 7-year-olds are also part of that. So now we're training all these school kids how to be self-sufficient food wise.
Oh, man.
And we brought that into one of the other programs in Congo, where Moses has a school for refugee children. And they're also learning, and those billets that have those are children that have they're total orphans. They don't have any relatives at all. So Christian families in the community take them as billets, but they're poor, right? They have nothing. So now that's bringing something back to the family that's their billet family, because these kids are now able to assist in their own well-being.
No,
so like we think that if we teach children how to grow a crop in a pail so they can eat, that we think that will stay with them.
It's second nature to them. To me, like that's the part where what you learn in those years, you never lose. It's like a bicycle.
So it's to me it seems odd when we talk about food costs and so on. And I mean, we live in different cycles in terms of weather, but there's really no excuse. You can grow enough vegetables in your summertime to never have to buy any if you're not, if you can't afford anything. Don't complain about the grocery store. Just do it yourself.
Well, you sometimes wonder, will that come out of some of the things that we keep hearing? Like, if it keeps going up, and what? Now, maybe that's going to get adjusted. I'm hoping that it is going to be adjusted, because you kind of said earlier on, is there anything that can adjust it? But I have hope in. Well, I was going to say with Dr. Lorenzo Smith, he gives me enormous hope that our youth are bringing to the table just wonderful things, like and that. And you probably see it in your kids. I certainly see it in my kids, and it's just like we've brought the internet, we've brought social media, and maybe they're saying, well, it's not delivering. It's just not delivering what they think. So when you mentioned going to the meeting the vice chancellor, and just that whole idea of, well, I'm Christian too, like there's something going on, Doug. There's just something going on, and I'm looking at even this podcast today, like connecting that and what's happening to us, that maybe it's set up to help.
Well, certainly some of the things that I see, and I think that's maybe that drives me a little bit. I can see that God is in this picture.
Oh, yes, very.
And so it's like we have to do our part, and then the rest of it isn't our problem. So that's why I don't really get that. Like I get upset if people don't follow the system. Right. Like if I don't like waste.
I can tell. So, I don't like waste either, right? I don't like it. What I don't like is when I see us the idea of waste being used as a hammer over us.
Yeah.
Like in the sense of, well, the climate and things like that are being like, I don't know that many people want to go out and waste things.
No.
But when you're threatening us that we're going to be the ones responsible for ending it all, that doesn't feel very good.
The approach is not how do we make it better. It's beating you down and saying you already did it.
Right.
You already wrecked it. It's too late, and I don't think anything is too late.
I'm actually in that car myself. I don't think there's anything that's too late. I'm seeing it in my own life, and then obviously you have it in your life and what you're presenting. So you're heading there in another month. Do you know what the plans are to do?
Well, this time I don't take a group along. I just go with Moses typically. So what we do is typically once a year, just kind of the two of us will go through what we've got going and how to, another set of eyes just to see if there's some improvements we can make or changes. And then we usually look at some new projects that are in the hopper, which Moses has done a bunch of legwork on typically. So part of the program is to find areas where you can use a church as a demonstration location.
Okay, yeah.
What we found to be the most effective is if we have a farmer preacher. So that would go back to my Mennonite background as immigrant families. My grandparents came from what is now Ukraine as immigrants, and the program at the time was they came with they always wanted to have a church wherever they moved, and so somebody would be tapped on the shoulder and say, you're going to be that guy, but he was typically still had to pay his own way. So most of those guys would be farmers, and then they maybe take a bit of time to get prepared for a church, but others would help them in times when they couldn't really, maybe harvest and seeding and so on. So that background comes from an unpaid minister.
Mm.
So if you translate that, for me, it was easy to say, we need to have these guys who are the pastors that live in the community. They're also able to farm, and they typically we find that those are the leaders that work uh, um, to put the whole holistic ministry together. It all adds up.
When you bring that, like, I go back to the farmer being creative, like, because I think that's a matter, and then you bring the Bible into that as a
Mhm.
pastor.
Mhm.
What a combination!
Yeah, so I mean, of course, they speak their own language at church, so I can't, without the interpretation, I'm not sure if we
Right.
touch everything, but you will often from those kind of people, you will often hear that the reflection was about the crop
Oh, okay. Yes.
it
Yes.
grew. Like, in other words, this is the abundance of God providing.
Yeah.
And so it's a tangible thing. And the water, of course, is the same, right?
Yes.
The water. But the difference with water wells and teaching them how to grow crops with drip irrigation is that everybody wants a well. And all institutions, whether they're church or secular or government or whatever, they all like the well because it doesn't take much to operate.
And it's water.
And it's water. But I mean, the fact is, you can take credit for the well
Okay.
without
Yes.
having to do much. But
Right.
if you want to create a demonstration garden for the community, you have to do some work physically, right? That's the different. Like, there's nothing wrong with having the evangelist not being in the garden.
Right.
But there's a difference between the church leader that's also in the garden with the people.
And that's almost like how it should be. And when I say I don't like using the word should, but that seems like a very obvious thing. Sometimes it isn't.
He's showing by example.
Absolutely.
And that makes a big difference to people. Like, so you're shoulder to shoulder, right? You're working together with your parishioners.
Yeah.
And I mean, the one guy that told me one time, he said, pastor, he said, yeah, we don't get much for, like, we built this building, but we can't finish it because, we don't get the money from the bigger organizations. And then I saw him again, I don't know, 6 months later or so. And he said, he said that first crop we got in, I never saw so much money in the collection plate in my lifetime. So there's the floor in the church now. We didn't need the other guys. We could do it ourselves. And that, I think that level of sort of that tangible effect is really what makes those communities thrive.
Work for sure. There's a graciousness that goes with that thankfulness that we can. And I don't care what anyone says. And this is one of the things that I used to think, because being university educated, you don't really touch anything, right?
No.
And as an engineer, you're always in the science and you're into the calculations. And I often have said that being part of the trades, like as a plumber, you daily have someone coming over to being so thankful that you unplugged their trade. Right? Or as a car, you got my car started that they couldn't do. And you have that instantly. Whereas I always worked on projects as an engineer, right? And we would be months before anyone would say, oh, that project really worked well, right? Like daily, it wasn't that way at all. And it goes back to what you're kind of saying when you're working with your hands to like the garden and bringing forward produce, be it potatoes or tomatoes. That to me is that there's something about that registers deep within us. And I don't know what it is, but there's something about it that is kind of missing as technology takes those things over.
I don't know that it can't be somewhat replicated even in your field as engineer.
Sure
so let's going back to just what you said about being the engineer, not knowing whether it's going the right direction or not. Like, because I work with a lot of them, I found the same thing as applicable in the field. If I, as the developer, include the engineer on a field trip,
That's a huge thing.
even early in the program, they begin to um, uh,
Connect with it.
yeah, they're basically connected in a
Absolutely.
different way. Like that paper is what I'm looking for, but I also want to understand that that engineer knows where the vision is for the project,
For
right?
sure.
Like, because you're doing one piece and other
Absolutely.
professionals are doing the other pieces, and I, as a real estate developer, need to be able
To
to
know that.
package all of them together. So I have to see fundamentally what is it that I need to display to you so that you become part of the project. And that is again a community thing, right? Like it's
No
not
question
like
about it.
like we
No
do,
question.
we do in fact miss some of that with the systems that we have now, right? The email and the
Well, that's kind of what I mean. Like the technology brings us away. You know, to your comment, people used to say you're not like an engineer.
Mhm.
Because I would go down and my father-in-law actually taught this. If you want to know how to build something,
Yeah,
what did I
go
do?
there.
Go and ask the guy who's building it.
Yeah, that's right.
And I would take that and go down and say, like, okay, what are we doing? How are we fitting it together? And I used to always, even when I'm leading, I'd be telling people, like, I know you think it all goes together on your screen perfectly, but go out and look at it.
Right.
Because it's not like what's on your screen. It's going to be something different. And so that was kind of to that point when you say you're bringing engineers in with you.
Yeah.
To me, that really helps bring everybody connected together. Like,
yeah, like
it's important.
So, like talking about that hydrologist we used, his name is Delitso. So he understands the field work, and our if you just get a driller in, they'll often have their own hydrologist.
Right.
But
Okay.
But the proof in the pudding is how many how many rigs did you send over there, and how many times did you find water or didn't find water, and so you have to be a team. So that
Yes.
the hydrologist has to feel the same value after the
Yes.
rig has
Yeah.
left, right? Because he was part of the program.
That's right.
If he doesn't hear that, then he can't
He's
really
disconnected.
perform, right?
No.
He's disconnected. And so it's
You get this. You get this.
well, I think a lot of times what people don't get is that they get an education and now we're all even with that education.
Yeah.
But as someone that hires people, typically I look at their education as the starting point. Like you have to have that education to get
Yes.
to this point. Now the rest of it comes in the field. And
Right.
so if I can speed that process up, the knowledge that you need in the field, as what you just just explained that you would do with other
Yes.
other engineers, it's easy for you to say, come with me and let's go and look at the lines aren't going to work on the
Right.
field. I mean,
That's right.
if you're the structural engineer and the architect's drawn a line there, he says, well, but it doesn't connect, right? Like those two lines have to meet somewhere and there's got to be a bearing point under it.
Yeah.
And
it's very true to me.
So, like it has to come as a package. And so we come back to Africa, the distribution company is completely engaged all the way through. And
Yes.
I mean, because they're making sales, they're listening to the customer information, whether it's satisfactory or better or whatever. They're producing other new ideas which aren't happening in the field. That is like they're dehydrating products now, and they're basically doing snack food for schools through some of those products. Well, again, they need the farmer.
Yes.
But they show the farmer, this is what we did with that product that we couldn't, maybe they're drying beets or potatoes or other things, dehydrating them. They show the farmers, this is where that product went that we couldn't use.
Well, I can do something about that, right? That's the answer.
That's the answer. And so everybody wins. And again, that's the whole program. If you just use that simple term,
Yeah.
everybody wins.
It is simple. And when you said early on, we were talking about how the different potatoes are for different French fries, right?
Right.
Like you kind of go like, if someone hasn't even gone down to understand that, you can't address it.
Right.
But like the person
Somebody
who
told them that, right?
You're thinking the person who grew that would know something about how to detail that out, right? So to me, that's an amazing story to me. This story could be used, I think, here on different things, right? That we kind of utilize as well. You know what? I'm taking a lot of your time today, Doug. It's been, for me, it's been a wonderful. I think this is like way past what I kind of had expected, but I knew I was going to learn a lot in this today. So before we go, there are two things. One of them is you do have a website that people can donate to, right?
Yes.
You said wellofplenty.com?
Yeah, that's right. And there's a donate button on there to click on, and you get a Canadian tax receipt.
Oh, cool. So are there other things that are associated with that if someone is listening today could say, like, I'm in. I want to find out more. Can they contact you through wellofplenty?
Yeah, they'll see there's a email that they can
right on the website.
Yeah, and it'll come straight into us to my desk.
You've got me intrigued to want to actually see what this looks like with my home boots on the ground. So to kind of wrap up, is there anything, you said a lot of things today that I think are spectacular, that you would like to like kind of end with, that like to pass on to, like from your idea of like how we work, or how, do you have anything you'd like to kind of, that you haven't asked or haven't said yet, that you would like to kind of just?
Well, I think you alluded to it talking about Dr. Lorenzo.
Okay.
What I really think is happening is that if you expose younger people into some form of humanitarian, Christian in our case, but even just humanitarian, if you will, if you show them directly, they will find out where they can plug in. And I think that's the one thing that's maybe it's a bit of a segue, but I was saying earlier about how I could only participate with a checkbook in my business career. There's a value to that, but there's also a danger to that, because people that, again, we're back to numbers, right? We're not back to percentages. We're back to numbers, right? Yeah. So a big check makes a big dent, I suppose, and people value it potentially higher than a small amount. But I think the challenge that I'd like to make out there is that young people who are just getting going, they may not have the money, but they have the skills, and those skills are as important as anything. And sometimes it takes time. I mean, I've lived a lot of fun things in my lifetime too, and had the family around to do that. And I always say to people, you don't have to go to Africa and live like them. You can go to Africa to help them. And then you can add another little bit of a jaunt in Paris or in London or whatever on your way home. And that's okay too, right? Like it's not like you have to live in poverty because you want to go and help somebody in poverty, but maybe you have a chance to do something that they don't have, that you can assist with. And I think that's what I feel good about, some of these guys going along with us. And they process it in time. It's not immediate, but once they process, where can I plug in? It's remarkable. They really do. They so it's not a there's a lot of positive ideas to be implemented.
Oh yeah.
And I think we can just say, go ahead and do it. Whatever it is you're going to do it well, and you'll make an impact, and you'll feel good about your impact. like giving a gift or receiving a gift. It
Yes,
really is
yes.
like that.
Well, it's like how you said at the beginning, like, and I've repeated, you were bringing sunglasses over to this crusade. That
Eyeglasses. Oh, they're reading
reading glasses, eyeglasses, not sunglasses,
Yeah.
eyeglasses.
Yeah.
They needed to see with, right? Which is in itself was a kind of a special thing to even do. And then being exposed to something with the mind that you have and what was able to start to connect, and then connecting with other minds that were kind of like aligned with that. It's kind of incredible what can happen, right? And I think that you're a great example of that. I think this episode of the podcast is a very great example of that, of how quickly Lorenzo even talked and said, well, you got to get Mr. Dueck on the podcast. So, Doug, I can't thank you enough for this. This has been a terrific learning experience for me, but also having a chat to find out all about well planning. Amazing story, and your story is amazing. So,
Thank you for giving me the opportunity.
oh, you're more than welcome, and I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Better Than Not, and we'll kind of sign in or listen to others as we bring on other different people, but. Listen to what Doug Dueck has done with this Well of Plenty is a pretty special thing that is going on. And with that, I'm going to say goodbye and thank you for joining us.
Are we on? Good. Welcome to the Better Than Not podcast. Sometimes we get it right, sometimes we don't. But when we at least do something, we know it's almost always better than not.